No, Paul's
Maybe
gonna
not
run it
Cate,
for
yeah,
me.
because Paul's going to control that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I'll share my screen.
So we can do that. Then we can just see him.
Okay. Let's see here. Let's get a little better view. All right. Okay, so thank you very much, Mike. Tonight, as you know, we're going to talk about advocacy for the new GDP. I'm with Alliance for Livable Communities. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along. I think we really ought to
General
be
development plan.
we really need to just briefly touch on what this is for just to make sure we're all familiar with it. So what is the General Development Plan? It's a comprehensive 20-year guide to land use and utilization of assets and conservation of resources for the county. It expresses citizens' visions of the future. That in itself, I think we kind of need to keep in mind as we go along. It's us that are expressing this, and that's what it's supposed to do. It complies with state requirements. The state requires that we make a plan and we revise it every 10 years. And it also, all development regulations that are adopted by the county must be consistent with this plan going forward. So it's a big deal because it can have a big impact on future legislation and future policies. The plan has been going on for quite a while. It got restarted after the elections. They reconstituted the CAC. That was back in March of 2019, and developed a couple of drafts here. We had public reviews. Second draft was just completed not too long ago, and it has just been delivered. We're here. It's just been delivered to the Planning Advisory Board, and it's going to be reviewed there. Citizens can comment on it, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail in a minute. And they'll hold hearings, and once they approve it, then it goes to the county council, and the county council has the final say. They have to approve it, so they're the deciders. So we're here. We've got a few months left in front of us, and good opportunities for advocacy. So after the plan is approved, it will be followed by regional area planning, and this allows us to recognize the complexity of the county, the demographic, land use diversity, the range of population densities. And so the county will be broken up into 9 different regions that we see on the right here. And that's an effort to give all these different areas opportunities to have slightly different plans. So let's start out with a satellite view, a high altitude view of Plan 2040, pros and cons, and some general impressions of it. I think, and these are, of course, my impressions, but the pros, I believe it contains some good desirable policies on environmental protection. It supports redevelopment, which is becoming more and more important. And we in South County like the idea that it keeps South County rural. They really make an effort to do that. On the con side, it has very weak growth management, and I think that's probably one of its biggest flaws. The focus is on where to put growth predicted by market projections. It doesn't address things like build-out limits or the idea of a stable population at some point in the not-too-distant future. There's not so much consideration given the current residents' desires, in spite of what we just said about it's supposed to express that. There are no policies or strategies for limiting growth rates or halting excessive development. There's no strategy for workforce housing, which is a topic that keeps coming up. And spending of economic development resources in West County is something that's proposed and is a sort of a questionable strategy. Things that just aren't treated at all are climate change impacts on the natural environment and developable land, the potential impact of a second Bay Bridge, things like single-use plastics and trash, and what are we going to do with that in the future as more and more accumulates, and the impact of development on water quality. A lot of the growth is pushed to West County, where the headwaters of Patuxent are. Nobody really talks about that much. So the plan is really organized in 4 sections plus an overview of regional planning. And I'll go through the first 4 sections. Cate will get into more detail on the regional planning part. But one of the things we have to always keep in mind as we read through this thing is that it's a guide, and it's really not a plan, but a guide. It's supposed to be a guide, but it doesn't have all the detail and schedules and budgets and all this that normally goes into a plan. It's a countywide guide. It will be used a lot in the regional area planning, and will be guiding future legislation. It sets out goals and policies and strategies that were intended to be good guidance. It specifies land use through the land use map, and that's important. There are 5 main sections I mentioned and 2 volumes. So this thing is big. The first volume, which really has the essence of the plan, is 71 pages long. The second volume, which is background supporting information, is 287 pages long. So this isn't something you're going to read in a couple of hours and make an opinion on. You really kind of need to set aside some time to dig into it, or at least, or pick certain things that are of interest to you and dig into those. I'm going to start out with the natural environment, which is the first section. The plan really has had large contributions from the County Citizen Environmental Commission. And it has really benefited from that. The CEC has really helped them identify some desirable goals. And they emphasize a couple of things that I think are good, which is preservation of forest cover and expansion of natural habitat protection. Missing in that section, though, is the climate change issues that we mentioned, the single-use plastics, etc. There's an opportunity here that we ought to recognize for advocacy for improvement of the way we treat greenways and green infrastructure. Greenways, as you know, are large connected areas of prime forest. And the map on the right kind of shows where they are in the county. They provide valuable environmental services. And things like stormwater retention, carbon sequestration, all of those things are provided by these prime forests. The total value of all these environmental services or ecosystem services that are provided is estimated by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources to be more than $54 million a year just for these forests. If we didn't have those forests, we would have to, the taxpayers would somehow see this in their tax bill. There's going to be an updated master plan for greenways coming soon. That's expected after the GDP, but not in the far distant future. And the language in the GDP can influence that legislation. So we have an opportunity here to protect greenways with even better protection than they have. The forest conservation legislation that was done last year does a better job, but it certainly was a compromise. It's not as good as some other counties, and there's lots of room for improvement. So, you know, we could easily lobby for things like no net loss of trees in greenways, prohibit or highly restrict development in greenways, or if we are going to have development, talk about high fee in lieu tree replacement. Things like that, and probably other things as well, I think are something we should consider for advocacy.
Hey, Paul, can I ask you one question there?
Sure.
Can you help me orient myself a little bit with that map?
Oh, sure.
And show where the for example, the Mayo Peninsula is versus yeah, use your arrow.
The Mayo Peninsula is here.
Okay.
This is the Annapolis area.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is the Broadneck Peninsula.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm telling you wrong. The Mayo Peninsula is here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
yeah, Matt's saying this is where it is. I agree. Thank you, Matt. So this is actually, this next one up is Annapolis. But
Okay, so we got the South River and the Severn, and then further north.
yeah, the Magothy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And Paul, let me just add, there's a nice forested area on the West Road River there. That's basically Cirque. That's that green area
Yeah, down here.
at Galesville,
Yeah,
and it's quite a large and naturally protected area.
that's a good area there. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And then most of the other areas that you can see are along stream valleys. So particularly those running west to east, south of there, are along stream valleys.
Yeah, that's correct. I
Hey,
agree.
thanks. That's very.
And of course, we have the Patuxent all along this edge here.
Yes, that's correct.
So, yeah. Yeah, they often follow streams and rivers. Okay, going forward, another area that needs some attention is agricultural preservation. There was a 1993 goal in the county of preserving 20,000 acres of woodlands and ag lands, and still 27 years later, we have only about 14,000 acres preserved. Some people like to claim that RA zoning is protection, but we all know that's not the case. Ag tourism is getting a lot of attention right now, but it doesn't seem to be a broad protective solution. So there's only vague references in the plan to expanded protection, and I think that's something that needs a little more attention. The economic drivers, I think we all understand, for the ag land development problem are that farmers are aging and the margins, the profit margins on farm products are very low. I've heard estimates of that farmers only are netting like $100 an acre on these commodity crops. So it's just it's shocking, really. So we need to give farmers a way to retire, monetize their land without subdividing it, and that I think the first thing that might come to mind is assure that budgeted funds for the purchase of conservation easements are there. I don't need to have much. If you look at the total production of the farm production of farm crops in the county, it's only like $20 million. So $5 million a year, which is 0.3% of the annual budget, would have a big impact. And I think if we could earmark some of that just as a baseline, we could have a big impact on agricultural preservation. Let's move to the built environment and look at the good side of that. It does have targeted growth areas for redevelopment, revitalization, and certainly some of these really need it. Areas around Glen Burnie and Brooklyn Park are places that we're all familiar with, and there are smaller areas around the county that need some attention. There's continuing emphasis I mentioned earlier on preservation of keeping South County rural. One good thing is that recommended land use changes that have occurred in the land use map try to sort of blend the usage of the adjacent areas well, so we don't have these little islands of strange commercial effects and things like that in residential areas. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a big problem here with how do you treat population growth in Anne Arundel County. This is sort of like the elephant in the room, because if you think about it, population growth is really what drives a lot of our planning. What should we do about it? How should we deal with it? The current growth rate is less than 1% per year on average, but there's just all kinds of data that says the majority of current residents want slower or no growth. GDP listening sessions, GDP surveys, the most recent Plan 2040 comments, and the platform, the election platform the county executive ran on a couple of years ago. All these will tell you that people really don't want to see as much growth as we're experiencing, and we're ready to have a stable population. So we asked Phil Hager back when he was head of planning and zoning to tell us what areas do people want to see population growth in their community. And he said, you can quote it, citizens typically do not want to see increased population density in their own community. So, I mean, you can say in a way they're saying they're kind of NIMBYs, but on the other hand, if nobody wants it, that's something in itself. So I think it's pretty clear that people don't like that. Now,
Paul,
there's another.
pardon me, Paul, just before you move on, can you go back to that last slide for a moment?
Sure.
I would be careful to equate what people are resisting to as population growth. What I understood people were resisting was development. And development is both population growth and commercial. And my understanding is that what Stewart ran on was not holding the population down, but moderating development. And I think we need to be mindful of the fact that it's both population, but frankly, I think it's more commercial development and the lack of infrastructure to support it that is what animated voters in 2018.
Well, I agree with part of that. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's not really, it's really development that Stewart was running against. But if you think about it, you know, if you're running against development, you're really running against population growth, even if it's commercial development, because commercial brings people that work in that. It sort of grows a need for more population. So anyway, I don't know, we can talk about that offline, but yeah. I see what you're saying, and strictly speaking, I agree. There's an additional plan here, problem here with build out and holding capacity. And it's problem conflicts with the predicted growth rate or the market demand. The BMC, Baltimore Metropolitan Council, I think it is, predicts demand for growth at its current rate, pretty much for housing and new residents, 29,000 units by 2040. In reality, if you go through and look at all the R zone properties, there are only 13,000 and a half roughly properties that are units which could be built with the current zoning. Now, in Plan 2040, they've kind of taken another route there and said, well, suppose we looked at all the dwelling units could be pushed into commercial, the C1, C2, C3 grades, into mixed use and into town centers. And if we count all that up, we have 32,000 more resident possibilities. Now, of course, all of these pretty much are multi-unit buildings, so it's a whole different kind of building. Most of these R zoned areas are single-family homes. So they're suggesting augmenting that with multi-family units and finding a home for all these predicted people that are going to move here that way. And in a way,
so Paul, in that sense, then it strikes me that what we're going to wind up talking about in a little while is where is this growth going to occur, and a certain conflict between areas in the county.
Yeah.
And whether they want the growth in that part of the county or they want it in some other place in the county, right?
Yeah, you just gave me a lead into this slide.
We didn't even plan that, by the way.
I know, that was good. We'll have to work together more. You know, people talk about this kind of growth or pushing population into high density areas of smart growth. And that's kind of what's happening here. This is a plot of housing and population growth in the various regions in the county that we were looking at a regional map, and these correspond to West County and in North Central County. These regions are growing at 2% or so rate, Down here, away in some of these outlying areas, we're down way below 1%. So yeah, on the average, it's less than 1%. But these guys out here in West County are really getting hammered with growth. And guess what? That's where all of these new multi-unit buildings would be going. So
what do the two colors represent?
one is the number of yeah. That's a good question, George, because it's not, they didn't label this graph, unfortunately. But I take it that one is the number and the other is percent. Now, we can argue over which is which, and I don't have an answer for that. But I think both of these kind of will make the case that there's a lot of growth in West County.
Yeah, I think the blue is the number and the gold is the percent.
It could be.
That's the way that's.
Yeah, it could be. It kind of, if you look at the bars, that kind of give you that feeling. So
can you just remind us, Paul, South County, our under this map, our region is what?
We're I think, well,
9.
South County is
9 and 8.
8 and 9, right?
8 and 9, yeah.
West and east. So we're over here.
Okay.
Now, this high growth, the new thought here of smart growth pushes a lot of this out to West County even more. So these people are already getting involved with population growth are going to have a bigger problem with that going forward. And I think we should expect residents to get seriously upset by that. I'm not sure that's a good solution. But when you really step back and look at this, you have to say, well, why are we doing this? Why are we accepting and planning for excess growth? Why are we just throwing up our hands and saying we have to find a home for all these people? Excuse me. There's really, when you think about it, there's not that much benefit for the current residents or the people here now. We ultimately also have to move towards a stable population. We know that you can't grow population forever. The planet is having this problem, and the county is going to have this problem. You know, you just keep growing, and pretty soon you're shoulder to shoulder, and you have resource limits and space limits and environmental damage, and you know, you just have to stop. It's not practical to grow anymore. So,
Paul, if I can just push back for a minute on that point, it seems to me from a county budgetary standpoint, and I think certainly the previous administration took this view, that that growth solves problems. Growth brings money. Growth brings taxes. And therefore, let's grow, and then we don't have to raise taxes on people because we got more money coming in. Now, there is a serious weakness in that argument because it doesn't take account the cost that are coincident to that growth. And it may be on a net basis this is bad, but don't you think there's a certain perception that growth is kind of the easy solution to budget problems?
I think there is that perception. I think you're right. And I think it's an incorrect perception because, as you said, they don't take into account the costs. And if you do the net of it, that typically a lot of people have shown that growth actually costs money.
Yeah.
Paul, I'm gonna step in here for just a second because I think it's important to know that the CAC talked a lot about wanting to limit growth, about not having excess growth. And there is a section that talks about capping growth and a discussion about whether it was feasible if you look at the plan. The county planning office said that they did not believe caps were necessary at this point because they also questioned whether they were legal, whether they were effective, and whether they brought unintended consequences. But that they
Kate, let me just respond to that, because that was a response to some earlier advocacy by us that we proposed a cap on building permits. I can talk about that in more detail, but and their response there is kind of funny because, you know, that approach has been used in a lot of jurisdictions very successfully for years and years, and it withstood all sorts of legal challenges. But these guys haven't done their homework, frankly.
Well, all I can tell you is that from the CAC standpoint, we were concerned about growth. It was a significant discussion
Yeah.
point. And where we ended up was that that issue would be revisited if we saw significant increase in the population growth in the county. And that
I was actually surprised at the low percentage growth that's projected. I thought that was going to be much higher. So
it's
when
a reflection of what it is now, Mike. Less than 1%. It has been.
It's pretty much like it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is an important issue. I don't want to, I didn't mean to sidetrack us on all that. And I think this is one of those, when I get to the end of this and we talk about what we do going forward, this is one of those issues I want to be on, put on the agenda.
So there's
Great.
a piece of this before, Paul, you pick up, that goes back to something that was said before. And that is, growth is not just people, it's infrastructure, and it's managing how people move and live in the county. And so I don't think we can look at any of these things in isolation. We have to think about the pieces that are there to support all the different aspects of it. So as you think about where you want to engage, don't think about growth as a box in and of itself, unconnected from road management, unconnected from school systems, unconnected from the tax base. It all is integrated.
Yeah,
I'll add
and
one
Cate,
more.
that's an important point, and that and that's why this is so complicated, right? Because all these pieces are interactive, and you can't just focus on one piece. But Paul, I didn't mean to get us sidetracked there. I kind of did. Paul, keep going, and because let's see, we are at 7:42 right now. We're gonna run out of time. If you can move on, because I do want to get to the advocacy piece.
All right. So yeah. So I'm just making the point. There's a need. I mean, I call this. I lump all this together as growth, and I don't disagree too much with what you're saying, but just for the purposes of having a label for it, I'm calling it growth. And what I'm suggesting here is we need growth limits with regional control. We have to be able to change the development rate and type rather to match what's needed in the region. And you know, there are all sorts of variants: workforce housing, redevelopment, greenfield, all that those things that need to vary from one place to another. And those needs will vary with time. Some of these redevelopment areas will get built out, and we won't need more redevelopment. So there's a real opportunity here with the regional plans to do this regional control if the regions had a tool for adjusting these things, which they do not. And that raised the whole thing of that Cate mentioned about and that big response in the GDP from the county about regulation of building permits, because that's the tool. But you know, that seems to have been rejected out of hand. We haven't had a whole lot of luck with that.
So Paul, can I ask you this? Because I'm really worried that we're going to run out of time tonight, and I want to leave some time for questions and for kind of an action plan here. I think your last point there about the regional plans tees up nicely, Cate, to talk about this process and the regional aspect of this and where we go from here. We're going to put this PowerPoint up on the South County Dem website. There are another 10 slides in here in this pack. I know, because I reviewed this slide pack with these two guys last night, and there's good stuff here. But and I encourage you all to go look at that. But Cate, can I ask you to pick up now with the kind of process and next steps, and because I want to transition to how we go do this, how we get involved.
Let me do one other thing. This is as I mentioned, this is my recruiting slide. ALC is planning an advocacy project. We're trying to get small groups for each of the county districts and have them lobby their council people and sort of coordinate these groups together. And so if there's any interest among anyone here in being involved with something like that, please get in touch with me. This is my email here. And as Mike says, I think this will be on the website. So anyway, Cate, I'll put you up here.
And
Okay.
Paul, thanks for that advocacy lead in, because I'm going to ask our folks to get involved and do that. I think we've got to be very engaged in this process as it goes forward. Cate,
So
take it away.
so Paul alluded to the fact that there are now 9 regions in the county. If you remember the 2009 plan, there were 16 small areas. They have been consolidated into 9 regions, and the division of regions is based upon demographics, on economics, and on geography. So for those of us who are in South County, you'll see that we are now Region 8 and Region 9. Region 9 stretches from the Mayo Peninsula down below North Beach, and it is all the maritime or waterfront parts of the county. Region 8 goes from Davidsonville, south of Crofton, through Davidsonville, down through Lothian and Friendship, and that's the agricultural focus of the county. And the intent was that when we get into regional planning, if we are organized around commonalities, doing the regional planning will make more sense, because we'll be focused on similar kinds of issues throughout that process. So as Paul said, this is a guide, not a plan. The intent of the general development plan was to set a broad vision for what we wanted the county to be like in 2040. And the rubber meets the road in the regional plans. Now, I know for a lot of people that's like, I don't really believe you, because when we did the 2009 plans, nothing happened. So why should I believe this is going to be different? I truly believe, and I think Pat, who is on here, who represented Crofton, will back me up. The whole intent here is to try to make these regional plans living documents created by people within the region, addressing issues of the region. And that's where the zoning change will take place, not countywide, which is what happened the last time, but based on land use within the region. So the regional plans must be consistent with the 2040 plan. And the land use map that Paul referenced before, which I'm not sure if it's still up, it was an interactive plan, or interactive map, which was really useful, is really driving the way the regional plans get made. We'll do them 3 at a time. And the estimate is it'll take about 1.5 years to do each one. There are 2 different timelines in the draft plan, and Region 8 and 9 are either in the 2nd or the 3rd grouping, depending on which of the 2 options get adopted. So there's a place that South County Dems could make an argument for where you want to fall in the planning cycle. Excuse me. Part of the timing is driven by the fact that there's a limited number of county planning staff, and there's a commitment to having staff supportive for each of the regional plans, not only in the development, but in the implementation. And there's a very involved implementation and measurement plan process outlined as part of the first draft. Would you advance that slide, please, Paul? So there will be stakeholder advisory committees, called SACs, which is a terrible term, that'll do the regional plans, right? The county exec will appoint these committees, and the composition will be really critical. So here's another place that I would encourage you to think about being vocal about who you would suggest to County Executive Pittman as candidates for the 2 regions that make up South County. What is also important is that there will be at least 1 person from each community on the SAC. So for Region 9, there will be somebody from Edgewater, somebody from Mayo, somebody from Galesville, somebody from West River, somebody from Shadyside, from Churchton, from Deal, from Chasey's Landing, and from North Beach. There's a list of, here you'll see the kinds of representatives in addition to the geographic representation that they'll be looking for. somebody who's been in the county for over 20 years, somebody who's new, local business representation, a home builder or a developer, an environmental organization, community or social organization, somebody who doesn't own but rents in the county, somebody who is a real estate broker, somebody who represents the next generation. So it'll be a balancing act to try to find representation from each of the communities, as well as the perspectives. These meetings, just as the CAC meetings were, will be open to the public. So you can attend, even whether we're virtual or whether we are face-to-face, whether you're on the committee or not. The difference is how you can engage and be involved. So this regional planning is where we will take these visions and some of the things Paul mentioned about workforce housing, about water quality, about climate change are embedded there, but not necessarily as obviously as you might like, because there are a series of whole other plans that feed into the general development plan. Related plans for transportation, for educational facilities, for water and sewer, for green infrastructure, for growth, for land preservation, that are done by other entities within the county that become subsumed in the general development plan. And the regional plans will need to look at both of those to say, all right, what does that mean for us in terms of the impact of sea level rise in Churchton? And what does that mean in terms of development in Deal? So that's where we really start to drive down the detail that will affect us in the way we live in this community over the next 20 years. Would you give me the next slide, please, Paul? So as I noted, comprehensive planning, rezoning will be done within the regions consistent with the land use map. There were a significant number of requests for land use reclassification as part of this process. We expect the regional plans to include action strategies to address specific elements that I referenced: agriculture, sea level rise, mobility, equity, accessibility. The things that are important to the people in the community are the things that need to be included in that plan. And there is an implementation action committee to be created for each of the regions to oversee implementation. So I would encourage you, if you look at anything at all, look at volume 1, which is the shorter at 71 pages, but look at the regional implementation piece and what's in that so that you can see how this gets measured. And Paul, if you can take me to the last slide for me. So these are the places that you can provide feedback on the issues of concern to you. So between now and January 6th, you can submit written comments to the Planning Advisory Board. And here's an address for it. Then the Planning Advisory Board will hold public forums, public testimony, and that will be January 6th and 7th. They have added a second date. Originally, it was only going to be one day, January 6th. They have added January 7th. And as an individual, you can have up to 3 minutes of testimony. As an organization, you get 5. So I would encourage you to kind of marshal your forces and take the full 5 minutes to speak about the aspects you like and what it is you particularly want to be engaged in from the standpoint of South County Dems. And then March of 2021, dates still coming, there will be hearings before the County Council. The plan will not be adopted until the County Council blesses it. We are about 5 months, 4 to 5 months behind our original schedule, based upon the fact that, as Paul said, the Citizens Advisory Committee was reconstituted in the spring of last year with a whole new set of players to have more citizen representatives. And then the pandemic put us behind, as you might figure, and the shift from face-to-face feedback meetings to these kinds of Zoom opportunities. So that's kind of how we got to where we are and the places that you might want to engage in. And Mike, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you. And thank you both for that overview. We're running up against our hour. I promised I would keep us till 8 o'clock. We're at 7:55. I don't have any questions from people on Zoom here in the chat. And I had a few questions I'm going to ask, but I think what I'm going to do, given the hour, is kind of really limit this to one question for Paul and Cate here. This is a process. This is not one point in time. This is a whole process, and as I think you both suggested, this is going to run out for a while. And George, I think you mentioned in a chat post there that this is going to run out past Stuart Pittman's tenure if he is not reelected. And so, we need to be cognizant of that as well.
Absolutely.
My agenda here this evening, I think I was transparent about this at the start, but if I wasn't, I'll be very transparent here. I think this needs to be a very top priority for the South County Democratic Club. I would like to see our club submit comments for that early January meeting, the 6th and 7th. We got 5 minutes to do that. I'd like to do that. I would like for our club to develop a policy paper on key issues here, and I would look to Cate and Paul to help us do that, but everyone else on this call as well. And then I want to engage the other clubs in this, because one of the things that strikes me in listening to you, and Paul, I think you used the term NIMBY earlier, and I think it's important to note that there is a certain aspect of all this, right? That I don't really care what happens as long as it's not in my backyard. As long as the development doesn't occur in South County, then whatever elsewhere. But we are all in this together, and we all have to figure out a plan that works for everybody. And so I have put this on the agenda for the Democratic Club presidents. They have embraced that so far, and I think you're going to see involvement by the other clubs as well. But I would like to see us take the lead here in moving this process forward. And so, Paul and Cate, if I can put you on the spot and ask you one more thing here, can you just spend a couple minutes and give your recommendations to the South County Democratic Club of what we should be doing and how we should move this process forward, how we should be involved?
Well, I don't, Cate, I'm sure has some good ideas, but I'll just say that, the thing that's coming up quickly is this planning advisory board. And I listened to their meeting the other night, and I had the impression some of these folks were going to look at this and look at the comments from citizens pretty well. So, I think the first thing we ought to do is submit some written testimony and on the 6th and 7th, some oral testimony. But I think the thing here is we have to zero in on what are the key topics of concern,
right?
And not make just general comments, but really zero in on a couple of things.
And I would say that I think at this point, you really have to be finding something of substantive difference in the plan for the planning advisory board to make recommendations for change.
Okay.
So
can I put you both on the spot again? Can I ask you to work with me over the next week to develop those comments and to develop that oral testimony for the 6th and 7th, and I will obviously engage our board. We've got a couple of board members through three. I think we got 3 board members with us tonight. I am sure all of them are excitedly ready to engage in this process. And I think that's an important next step. And then after that, and Cate, to you, your point here at the end of that presentation was the importance of that regional process.
Right.
That really strikes me as critical. And we need as a South County Democratic Club, we need a committee, a group, an approach to go influence that and to have some impact there, right?
I think that's right, Mike. Although in terms of timing, that committee is not going to be the thing that's appointed between now and January. So I would worry less about who am I recommending at the moment.
Okay.
And more about, are there issues of substance that you think either need to be more fully fleshed out or you have substantive disagreement with? The biggest thing from my perspective, and Pat, you may want to chime in as somebody who sat in those meetings with me, is we did not spend any time talking about a Second Bay Bridge. It came up in passing, but it never got substantive discussion because it's a state decision. And it's the kind of thing that when all
it
is
does have
done,
a huge impact on us, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
It's probably not going to happen in the next 20 years. Realistically, from an engineering standpoint, I just don't see it happening in the next 20 years.
But that's an example of something of huge impact that you might decide you want to think about. And George's point about it, where it falls in the, remember this plan gets revisited in 10 years. So let 10 years be the timeline. Right. What's happening with sea level rise and climate change in South County on the waterfront is huge.
So I'm gonna again, first things first, right? Deal with those things that are most immediate. And it seems to me that written testimony and the testimony on the 6th and 7th are the immediate challenges, and we need to do something, and we need to figure out what we're going to do there. So with your permission, I'm going to call our board back together here very shortly, early next week, and develop that. And I want our club to submit testimony for that. And Cate and Paul, with your help, I would like for you to work with us to do that. And then going forward, what I'd like to put out to our club is an action plan over the next however long, whatever our time frame should be, as to how we can be involved in this one. This is, to me, this is a very, very important issue. I am a relative newcomer to South County. I have been here for 10 years. My problem, Cate, when I was looking at that slide about the more than 20 years and I'm right in between. I don't really fit into either of those categories. However, I now have 30 ticky-tack houses down the road from me that were approved by Steve Shue and bypassed normal zoning requirements, and they were built on a wetlands, and now our roads are flooding down here. And so this issue is also personal to me. And I think it should be personal to all of us. So and we need to protect South County.
With your permission, I might suggest, because I don't know who's on your board and who's not.
Yep.
That anybody who's on this call who's not on the board, who has an issue of concern based on what they've heard, let you know before the end of the week so that you can take that into account when you think about what are the issues you want to consider being where you focus your attention.
Perfect. So everyone should have my email. It's very simple. It's mike@southcountydemclub.org. Send me an email about anything and everything that you are interested in with respect to tonight's call. I'm going to circle back with the board and ask the board to convene next Monday night and try to move expeditiously on these kind of comments. And 7 o'clock.
Okay.
And Cate and Paul, thank you so very, very much for doing this tonight. It was tremendous. I've learned so much so quickly from you two, and I'm sure others have as well. And so thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for the invitation to talk. It was an honor to be able to speak to the group.
And Paul needs recruits for his group as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, we're looking for cooperation, collaboration, and whatever else.
Exactly. We're all in this together, right?
Right.
All right. With that, I'm going to terminate tonight's meeting. Call to adjourn. Thanks everyone for joining us. Please continue to support South County Dem Clubs. We appreciate it. And everyone have a very safe holiday season. Stay well. We'll see you all soon.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Thank you, George. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.